started, let's get into a conversation about the world of aquaculture. And wanted to start with a bit of a broad question for you. And this one, we can open up to either Matt or Tim to provide some answers or insight. Our first sort of broad question is, what are some emerging trends that you have your eye on with respect to the aquaculture industry? Matt, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So there's kind of the obvious one that seems to be garnering a lot of attention worldwide is the development of RAS systems, or the investment into RAS systems around the world. Still obviously quite early stage with it as far as proving out the concept is on a commercial scale, but there's no doubt that it's grabbing headlines around the world. So we're paying close attention to that and watching how it develops and how it, success-wise, how that shapes up. But something that seems to be a little quieter, but is still of significant interest to us, is floating closed containment and some of the floating solutions that are, I guess, would be an alternative to NetPen aquaculture, and how they're faring. They seem to be, those initiatives seem to be driven by some of the more established players in aquaculture around the world. And so as a result, I don't think we see the same amount of headlines as far as investments and that sort of thing, but they're there. And so and some of them have been quite successful, quietly quite successful. So those are two trends. We're watching both of them, but I think the one that seems to be really interesting, just based on the lack of attention that it's drawing, is these possible deviations or moves away from open net farming operations, but still having operations in the ocean.
I also see that one of my clients is Agri-Marine, and they have the closed containment pens in a lake, and it's quite an interesting concept, and it definitely requires oxygen. Also, nano bubbles are I'll keep my eye on in the industry.
I think to complement what Matt and Tim mentioned, I am also very interested in this new term called integrated aquaculture. And I think the integrated aquaculture, it will play a vital part in what is in the NetPen operations in the future. In the integrated aquaculture, I'm talking about not only having salmon or trout, but also having what is called nature filters, kind of like seaweed or scallops, that can also help reduce the pollution that is caused by having hundreds of thousands of fish in the net pens. So in this way, I think the net pen operation would be much more sustainable and will regain the social license that it's been a bit damaged the last few years.
Yeah, and maybe to add to Tim's comment there, on a more granular level, I would agree with him. The application of ultrafine bubbles or nano bubbles in the environment for all species is of it's a significant interest. We're heavily involved in that, and we've seen some pretty impressive results from applying those technologies. And also, the other trend is probably one that we're watching closely is the effects of harmful algae and water quality on farms around the world. Where we're based in Campbell River on the west coast of Canada, harmful algae has been just a regular part of doing business for so long that I think it's interesting insofar as not to be cruel to the areas around the world that have struggled a bit or felt the negative impacts in recent years, but it's interesting to see how that is a technology or a farming requirement for farming operations as it's growing around the world. We're seeing areas. Last year we saw Norway with a massive die-off from harmful algae. Really, staggering numbers that they were talking about, and other things like gill health and hydroids and jellyfish. How those, many of those can be tied to climate change and warming ocean temperatures and that sort of thing, and how that affects farming operations, but on how it affects it, but also how it can be mitigated, and seeing how that's becoming what it's kind of growing from areas that have had to do it before, like we have on the west coast of Canada, into areas like Chile and Norway and Scotland and Australia, for that matter, where that it's a new challenge, but in a way it doesn't have to be as painful as some of the areas have experienced over the years.
Right.